Welcome to another exciting reading of The Seven Songs of Merlin by T.A. Barron. This is Book 2 of the Lost Years of Merlin series, and we are on Chapter 18 tonight called Light Flyer. In the last chapter, Merlin learned the soul of the Song of Binding after getting tricked by a sneaky little otter. He saw a pair of hawks flying in the sky and knew that maybe bonds were of the heart instead of physical. So he learned the second song of the seven. So here is called Light Flyer. The blue light had barely faded from my staff before my thoughts turned to the third song, that of protecting. I turned from the lake, its smooth surface gleaming darkly, to the forested valley surrounding us. Crossing the steep, thickly wooded ridge would be only the beginning, for the third song would require yet another long voyage. The skill protecting be the third, like dwarves who tunnel deep. To the land of the dwarves! Their realm, Rhea explained, was visited only rarely, and almost never by choice. For the dwarves, while peaceful to their neighbors, did not welcome any intruders. All that was known about their underground realm was that its entrances lay somewhere near the origins of the river Unceasing, on the high plains north of the Misted Hills. This time we had no choice in how to get to our destination. We would have to walk. Even pushing ourselves each day until long past sunset, it took the better part of a week to work our way over the hills. Our meals consisted mainly of wild apples, crescent nuts, a sweet vine that Rhea discovered, and the occasional egg or two from an unwary grouse's nest. While we avoided any more encounters with living stones, the trekking proved arduous. Vapors swirled constantly, wrapping us in misty shawls, inhibiting our views from even the higher ground. During one swamp crossing, Rhea lost one of her shoes in a pit of quicksand. We spent much of the afternoon searching for a rowan tree so she could weave a replacement from its leathery bark. 2 days later we crossed a high pass, slick with ice and snow, but only after walking the entire night of the full moon. Finally, bedraggled and exhausted, we came to the high plains of the river's headwaters. Countless star-shaped yellow flowers blanketed the plains, filling the air with a tangy scent. In time, we reached the rushing river Unceasing itself. There we encountered a pair of cream-colored unicorns grazing along its banks. Heading north, we followed the river's serpentine path up a series of wide alpine meadows that ascended like bright green stairs. As Rhea reached the edge of one of these meadows, she stopped, pointing at the line of snowy mountains in the distance. "Look, Merlin! Behind those peaks lies the city of the giants, Varigol. I've always wanted to see it, even now it's only a ruin. Our bossa says it's the most ancient settlement on Finkyra." "Too bad dwarves, not giants, are our goal." I bent down, pulling a handful of fluffy-tipped grass. "Giants will have to wait for the fifth song, the one that involves Varigol somehow, if we make it that far." As we continued trekking after sunset, a gleaming disk emerged from the layers of clouds. Clipped along one edge, the moon was now waning. I pushed harder, practically running along the grassy bank, knowing full well that more than half of my time had vanished, and I had unraveled only 2 of the mysterious songs. How could I possibly complete the remaining 5, climb up to the other world, obtain the elixir, and return to Ellen, all in less than 2 weeks? Not even a real wizard could hope to do so much. By the glow of the moon, we scrambled over yet another steep rise, grasping at the roots and shrubs to keep from tumbling backward. The river Unceasing, now only a splashing stream, flowed down the slope beside us, its little falls and pools sparkling in the silver light. At last we topped the rise. Before us stretched an enormous moonlit meadow, split by the shining ribbon of water. Bumblebee fell in a jangling heap by the stream. "I can go no further without rest, and also food. A jester needs his strength." Panting in the night air, I leaned against my staff. "It is your audience who needs strength." "Too true, too true, too true." He mopped his brow with the edge of his heavy cloak. "On top of everything else, I'm baking to death. This cloak has me perspiring even after the sun goes down. And during these hot days we've been enduring, it's sheer torture." Perplexed, I shook my head. "Then why don't you leave it behind?" "Because without it I may freeze, turn to ice. Why, it could snow any time. This hour, this minute, this second." Rhea and I traded amused glances. Then she bent down and sniffed the star-shaped flowers. Grinning, she picked a fistful of stems, rolling them into a compact yellow mass, then handed the roll to me. "Taste it," she implored. "The astral flower is a trekker's sustenance. It is said that lost travelers have lived on nothing else for many weeks." Biting into the roll of flowers, I tasted a sweet yet sharp flavor, almost like burned honey. You know who would like this? Our old friend Shim. "Yes," replied Rhea, or, as he would say, "certainly, definitely, absolutely." She handed a fresh roll to Bumblebee, sprawled on his back by the stream. "Shim loved honey as much as I do. Even before he grew into a giant, he had enough honey for one." With a sigh, she added, "I wonder whether we'll ever see him again." Kneeling, I placed my cup hands in the shimmering water. As I brought the water to my face, however, the moon's wavering reflection appeared within my hands. I jerked backwards, drenching my tunic. "Did you see something?" Rhea studied me with concern. "Only a reminder of all the damage I've done." She considered me for another moment. Then, in a voice so soft I could barely hear it above the splashing stream, she spoke. "You still have the heart of a wizard." My hand slapped the water, splattering us both. "Then give me the simple heart of a boy. Rhea, whenever I tap into those yearnings, those powers, those arts of wizardry, I do something terrible. Because of me, my mother lies at the edge of death. Because of me, much of the dark hills remain a waste, just waiting for Rita Gower and his warrior goblins to return. And because of me, my own eyes are blind and useless." Bumblebee propped himself up on one elbow, clanging his bells. "Such despair, my boy. Could I offer my assistance? Allow me to tell you a riddle about the—" "No!" I shouted, waving him away. I turned back to Rhea. "The truth is, Domni was a thieving old hag, but she had it right. I could be the worst disaster ever to come to Finkyra." Rhea said nothing, and bent to take another drink from the stream. As she raised her head, she wiped the water from her chin. "No," she declared at last. "I don't think so. It's not anything I can put my finger on. It's more the berries. I mean, the harp actually did work for you, at least for a while. The speaking shell, too, did your bidding. All I did was find the right shell. Then I used its own power to bring my mother here. Even if you're right, what about Tuatha? He wouldn't have allowed you to read the 7 songs unless there was at least some chance you could master them and travel to the other world." My head drooped. "Tuatha was a great wizard, a real wizard, and he did tell me that someday I might become one too. Yet even wizards make mistakes. No, the only way I'll travel to the other world is when I die, and by then my mother will have died as well." She hooked her finger, still wet from the stream, around my own. "There's still the prophecy, Merlin, that only a child of human blood can defeat Rita Gower and those who serve him." Turning away, I gazed at the wide meadow beyond the stream. Though some of its grasses glimmered in the moonlight, most of the meadow lay shrouded by shadows. Somewhere out there, I knew, lay the realm of the dwarves, and somewhere beyond that lay the secret entrance to the world of the spirits, guarded by the ogre Balor. I pulled my hand away. "That prophecy, Rhea, is worth no more than the person it refers to. Besides, I only want to save my own mother, not battle the warriors of Rita Gower." Reaching for a pebble, I tossed it into the silvery stream, and I doubt I can even do that. "Ah, misery," intoned Bumblebee, his face as shattered as the meadow. "At last you see the wisdom in what I have been telling you all along." I bristled. "Nothing you have told me remotely resembles wisdom." "Don't be offended, please. I'm only pointing out that there is only one thing left for you to do. Give up." My cheeks burned. Seizing my staff, I stood up. "That, you poor excuse for a jester, is the one thing I shall not do. I may be certain to fail in this quest, but I will not fail out of cowardice. My mother deserves better than that." Casting a glance at the moonlit meadow before us, I spoke to Rhea. "Come if you like. The dwarves' realm cannot be far from here." She drew a long breath. "Yes, but it would be foolish to try to find it now. We need a few hours' rest. And Merlin, that meadow, it's full of danger. I can feel it. On top of that, the dwarves' tunnels are surely hidden. By the land, if not by magic. They will be hard enough to find even by the day." "Just give up," urged Bumblebee, reaching for some more astral flowers. "Never," I growled. Pivoting on the walking stick, I turned to go. "Don't, Merlin!" Rhea stretched her arms toward me. "Ignore him. Wait for daylight. You could easily get lost." If I could have breathed fire, I would have. "You wait for daylight. I can take care of myself." I strode into the meadow, the tall grasses swishing against my tunic. Moonlight streaked the land like luminous claw marks, yet most of it lay shadowed. Then, several paces ahead, my second sight detected an unusually dark patch. Since no rock or tree stood near enough to cast a shadow, I realized that it might be a tunnel, or at least a pit. Not so foolish as to walk right into such a thing, I angled to the left. Suddenly, the earth beneath my feet gave way. I plunged downward. Before I could even cry out, total blackness swallowed me. When I awoke, I found myself curled into a tight ball covered with a heavy blanket that reeked of smoke. Something was carrying me, grunting constantly, though I had no idea what form of beast it was or where it was taking me. Thick ropes bound my arms and legs, while a wad of cloth filled my mouth. But for the muffled grunts beneath me, I heard no sound but the beating of my own heart. Jostled and bounced like a sack of grain, I felt increasingly dazed and bruised. My torture seemed to last for hours. Finally, the jostling came to an abrupt halt. I was heaved onto a floor of smooth, hard stone. I lay there, face down, my head spinning. The blanket was ripped away. With great effort, I rolled over. An assembly of dwarves, each one no taller than my waist, stared at me with eyes redder than flame. Most wore tangled beards, while all bore jeweled daggers on their waists. Standing beneath a row of sizzling torches, with feet firmly planted and burly arms crossed on their chests, they looked as immovable as the rock walls surrounding them. One, whose beard showed streaks of gray, straightened his back stiffly, leading me to guess that he had been the one grunting dwarves who had carried me here. "Cut his bonds," commanded a sharp voice. Immediately, strong hands rolled me over again and sliced through the ropes. Someone pulled the wad of cloth out of my mouth. Working my stiff arms and parched tongue, I managed to sit up. Spying my staff on the floor beside me, I reached for it. A dwarf lifted his heavy boot and stomped on my wrist. I shouted in pain, my cry echoing within the rock walls. "Not so fast!" It was the same sharp voice. This time, though, I located its source. A thick-set dwarf seated on a throne carved of jade, inlaid with rows of gems, which rested on a ledge above the stone floor. She had unruly red hair, pale skin, and earrings of dangling shells that clinked whenever she moved. Her oversized nose looked nearly as big as Shim's before he had become a giant. She wore a black robe embroidered with runes and geometric shapes sewn in glistening gold thread, plus a peaked hat to match. In one hand she held a staff, almost as tall as my own. As I started to stand, the dwarf raised her free hand. "Do not try to get up. You shall be lower than me, and do not reach again for your staff." She leaned toward me, clinking her white shell earrings. "A staff can be dangerous, you know, even in the hands of an upstart enchanter like you, Merlin." I caught my breath. "How do you know my name?" She scratched her prominent nose. "No one knows your true name, not even you, it be clear." "You called me Merlin." "Yes," she said with a snorting laugh that seemed to make the torches flame brighter in the cavern. "And you may call me Ernalda, but neither may be a true name." Furrowing my brow in bewilderment, I tried again. "How did you know to call me Merlin?" "Ah!" The white shells clinked as she nodded. "That be a better question." She raised a stubby finger to touch an earring. "The shells told me, just as a shell told you a few things, some that you be too headstrong to hear." I shifted my weight on the hard stone floor. "Not only that, you be an intruder." Arnalda waved her arms, sending their shadows racing against the walls. "And I do so despise intruders." At this, several of the dwarves reached for their jeweled dagger. One, whose forehead showed a jagged scar, chortled loudly. The sound hovered in the air of the underground room. Stroking her staff, Arnalda considered me for a long moment. "Even so, I might yet choose to help you." "Truly?" I glanced at the dwarves, who groaned in disappointment. Then, recalling my experience with the trickster of the lake, I felt suddenly suspicious. Why might you help me?" She snorted. "Because one day, if you be successful, you might wear a hat such as mine." Not comprehending, I examined her peaked hat more closely. Its point slouched to one side. Lower down, dozens of tiny holes pierced its surface, allowing Arnalda's red hair to poke through. But for the silver embroidery, which might have been more attractive if it showed stars and planets instead of runes, it was quite simply the most ridiculous hat I had ever encountered. Why would I ever want a hat like that? The dwarf's eyes narrowed, as if she could read my thoughts. In a deeper voice than usual, she declared, "This be the hat of an enchanter." I winced. "I didn't mean to insult you." "That be a lie." "All right, then. I am sorry I insulted you." "That be true." "Please, will you help me?" Arnalda tapped thoughtfully on her staff before finally uttering a one-word answer. "Yes." A black-bearded dwarf, standing beside her throne, grumbled angrily. In a flash, she turned on him and raised her hand as if to strike. He froze, petrified. Slowly, she dropped her hand, even as his beard dropped right off his face. He squealed, covering his naked cheeks with his hands. Meanwhile, other dwarves hooted and guffawed, pointing at the fallen beard on the floor. "Silence!" Arnalda shook herself angrily, jostling the shell earrings, as well as the throne on the ledge. "That will teach you to doubt my decisions." She turned back to me. "I will help you because you might yet defy all odds and survive. Mayhaps even live to become an enchanter yourself." Slyly, she squinted at me. "And if I help you now, you might one day help me." "I will. I promise I will." The torches sizzled, wavering, making the rock walls themselves appear to vibrate. Arnalda leaned forward, her shadow enlarging on the chiseled surface behind her. "Promises be serious things." "I know." I gazed at her solemnly. "If you help me find the soul of protecting, I will not forget." Arnalda snapped her fingers. "Bring me a light flyer, and a carving stone with a hammer and chisel." Still wary of some sort of trick, I asked, "What is a light flyer?" "Be still." But for the sizzling of torches, silence filled the cavern. For several minutes no one stirred. Then heavy boots clomped into the underground room as a pair of dwarves approached the throne. One of them hunched under a huge black stone, as rough as the walls themselves, that must have weighed twice as much as he did. At a nod from Arnalda, he lowered his shoulders and dropped the stone with a thud on the floor. A second dwarf bore a hammer and chisel in one hand, and some sort of small glowing object in the other. It seemed to be an upside-down cup made of clear crystal, resting with its rim against his palm. Within the crystal, an unsteady light flickered. At Arnalda's nod, he set the tools by the stone. Then he carefully placed the cup on the floor, taking care to slide his hand quickly away so that the something inside would not escape. Arnalda gave a snorting laugh, and the torches flamed brighter. "Inside the crystal cage be a light flyer, one of Finkyra's rarest creatures." She grinned crookedly at me, a look I did not like. "Your next song be protecting, be it not? To learn what you need to know, you must find the best possible way to protect the light flyer from harm." Observing the hammer and chisel, I swallowed hard. "You mean carve a cage from that big stone?" She scratched her nose pensively. "If that be the best way to protect the fragile little creature, then that be what you must do." "But that could take days or weeks." "It took dwarves many years to carve the tunnels and halls of our realms." "I don't have that much time." "Silence!" She pointed her staff at a hole in the ceiling, which glowed like a subdued light of its own. "That tunnel, like the one you fell down, provides us with the air as well as light. There be hundreds of them, each one carved as smooth as the floor you be seated on, each one concealed on the surface by enchantment. That be why dwarves stays so well protected. That be why you came here to learn the soul of the song." "Are you sure there's no other way?" I protested. The earring swayed from side to side. "There be no other way to learn the lesson yourself. Your task to be protect the little creature from harm. Now begin." With a final clink of her shells, Arnalda left the room, followed by her entourage. I gazed at the sizzling torches on the walls, watching the shadows cast by her throne grow, then shrink, then grow again. That very throne, like the walls themselves, had been hewn from unforgiving stone. the same stones that the dwarves over centuries had molded into an entire realm. And now it was my turn to mold stone. Ooh, that was an eventful chapter. But tomorrow we will read chapter 19 called Protecting. So thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful night.